Hello, my name is Father Jacob Rouse, and I am the pastor of Notre Dame Parish in Cresco, Iowa. And for today's Chrono Minute, I would like to talk to you about incense. Incense is an ancient tradition that goes even way back before the Christian church, and you are going to see me use it in Mass in the next few weeks because we've got some high holy solemnities coming up, and I'm very excited to do it. So it's not just about, yes, let's get this out of the way. Fire and smoke is very, very cool, and so I like to use incense because it's cool, but there's a lot of reasons, historical and theological, as to why we use incense. The first recorded use of incense for worship in a religious practice is in Egypt around 2400 BC. That is 400 years before Abraham. So incense in our Catholic liturgy represents three things: prayer, sacrifice, purifying, and, bonus, clouding the senses. We'll get to all those. So the first thing that incense represents is prayer, and that represents that our prayers are literally rising up to heaven to God's ears, just like you see the smoke rising up. Psalm 141, verse 2 says, "Let my prayer be incense before you, my uplifted hands an evening offering." And so, it goes back to ancient days with that, with our prayers rising up to heaven. It also reminds us of the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of cloud by night, by which the Israelites were guided from their journey from Egypt, their exodus from Egypt to the Red Sea. God led them from location to location with a pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire by night to guide them. So this is Exodus chapter 13, by the way. So the pillar represents God's constant companionship and guidance, and the rising clouds up to the ceiling of the church remind us of that. So I love myself watching, and then the altar servers watching the clouds of incense rising up to the ceiling of the church. The third thing that incense represents is sacrifice. So sacrifice. So in the ancient world, we believed that the gods, the pagan gods, and God himself were delighted and made happy by the smell of us offering up burnt sacrifice. So when you take your best, strongest oxen or sheep or whatever animal you have that you use for work and farmland and getting food, and if you use that animal and you waste it and burn it to the gods, then that sacrifice rises up. Basically, it's a act of thanksgiving. When we give our best back to God, then He gives us blessings and et cetera, et cetera. But in modern terms, we interpret that as the Eucharist. Like, we give our best to make the Mass happen, and so then, therefore, God gives us the very best of Him, which is Himself, which is Jesus Christ in the body, blood, soul, and divinity of the Eucharist. So imagine slaughtering and burning the biggest and best animal in your flock. Or even better yet, imagine lighting on fire your newest, most beautiful, expensive John Deere combine or tractor. That's what it was like. And so it's a sacrifice, and then therefore when we give it up to God, we are making a sacrifice. And so that smoke that goes up and rises up to heaven makes the gods happy, makes God happy. Another thing about sacrifice that's important is that it's not that it makes God happy. That's not enough. It's the fact that it's good for us. Any command, any rule that the Catholic Church has, from the Ten Commandments to the Catechism, anything that you are told to do is because it is for your own good. It's not just because God said so. It's because by the law of nature and by the law of emotions and our physical bodies, everything that God asks us is because it is good to do. And so it is good to sacrifice your prime time for farming in Sunday morning, your best, your time, and your offering to God so that it can come back to us as a Eucharist, as a thanksgiving, and we give thanks to God for all that He's given us. Incense in Mass is also purifying. Ancient traditions say that in Exodus 28 specifically, they talk about how the priest needs to go inside to the Holy of Holies with incense and, this sweet smelling smoke and shake it about. The cool thing about theology and ancient traditions is that it's not only practical, but it's also theological. So we believe that the purifying act of making smoke go away gets demons out of here. That's what some traditions believe. But a cool thing is that in Exodus 28, the priest was supposed to have bells around his ankles and possibly a rope in some Jewish traditions. This is why, if you are ever at daily Mass, I will ring the bell as I enter into the sanctuary, enter into the Holy of Holies. I will ring a bell because goes back to the ancient Jewish times. So the funny thing is, and the dark thing about it is that remember in Exodus and the Old Testament that if a human looked at God, then they would die instantly because they are imperfect and God's gaze would kill them. But the practical side of that historically is that when they go into the Holy of Holies, no one would go in there unless they were offering sacrifice or doing priestly things. And so therefore, can you imagine this room, the Holy of Holies, was covered in animal blood and guts and would rot and would smell, and the person would pass out. And so, therefore, they interpreted that as God was killing them because they did not atone for their sins. So that's why they tied a rope around their ankle or waist and had bells attached to them so that if they fell down and the rope went slack, that means that they can pull out their dead or unconscious body. One of my seminary professors taught me that, and when horror and religion are so closely intertwined and the line is blurred and it becomes sublime. I mean, that's what we have from the cross, like the cross is horror. It's gory and nasty and ugly, but it's also extremely beautiful. The final and bonus symbolic nature of incense is that it clouds our senses. So every single Mass, remember that all 5 of your senses are going to be used. Look for that next time you go to Mass. So the way that incense, because whether it's smoke from incense or whether it's from a campfire or a cigarette or whatever, like it clouds our senses. It clouds your eyes. It makes you can't smell. You can't breathe as well. And that is symbolic of how God's nature and His mysterious nature clouds our human senses, because on this earth it is not true reality. Until we get to heaven, then that is true reality. So we are reminded by the incense, which clouds our senses and makes us either cough or can't see as well, and envelops the entire altar and sanctuary in a cloud of smoke. It reminds us that God's nature will not be clear to us, and it will cloud us until we get to heaven. So, I only have a few Corona minutes left, by the way. Once June 5th and 6th happens, and the pandemic is somewhat over, I'm going to stop Corona minutes and I'm going to switch back to only making videos on Friday. So, there's only, what's today? Today is Friday. I'm making today's for Thursday, so that means Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. So only 4 more Corona minutes. I'm very excited to welcome you all back to church, to see the incense, to partake in the Lord's Supper, and to just join in fellowship once again. So my name is Father Jacob Rouse, and that's all I have to say. Go wash your hands.